Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and welcome back to Diablo 4 and our second beta weekend in the open beta weekend. This is of course my Necromancer, and this is what I believe to be the most stupid, overpowered, broken, ridiculous build and playstyle that I've seen in a game like this, and it's pretty undeniably the strongest thing in the current Diablo beta situation. What you are seeing is me completely immune to damage, dealing ridiculous, staggeringly good AoE damage, constantly popping explosions, and also it's so good that it works as an incredible single target DPS. I'm healing during it. Did I mention I'm completely immune to damage as well? It doesn't make sense to me that this is in the game. The thing is, we do have like world tiers to consider. We're in the baby like beginner stuff with world tier 1 and 2. Things are going to get interesting at 3 and 4, and maybe builds of this incredible strength are going to be required at that point. But still, this feels crazy to me. This feels so overtuned. Surely they're going to fix this, but let me explain what the hell's going on here. It's all centered around this ability here, Blood Mist, where we turn into a bloody mist, and as you can see, we become immune to damage for 3 seconds. Now, the downside here is that we get slowed by 20%, and we do actually get some damage out and a little bit of healing. We can enhance that to improve it in various ways, but why this is so good is to do with this ability right here, Corpse Explosion. Basically, you detonate a corpse, dealing damage to surrounding enemies. You can enhance that in different ways, but just to show you, when you defeat some enemies, you can spawn these corpses as necromancers, and I can do 2 things. I could say, use one to spawn an ally, or buff them up if I've got max allies, or I can press Corpse Explosion to do this. A nice, satisfying pop. So that's what's happening when I'm using the Blood Mist. Loads of those things are being popped. As I walk near these ones and pop Blood Mist, you see they pop automatically as they go. I also leave behind a trail of popping them, and every time I deal damage or explode, I might spawn more. This is because of this legendary aspect. Blood Mist triggers Corpse Explosion on surrounding corpses. When Blood Mist detonates on a corpse, its cooldown is reduced by X amount. Now, you can roll different amounts of this. I believe the best is even 3 seconds off the cooldown per corpse explosion, which is insane. So you can roll this on different things, and you can roll different power levels on it. I've actually got a weaker one at 1.5 seconds. You know, more of an average one would probably be 2 seconds off your cooldown. But as you can see, it really doesn't matter. Basically, I just press the button, corpses pop, that kills things, then that creates more corpses, the cooldown gets reduced, and then I can just press it again, often immediately. So our build is going to center around this ridiculous concept, and we're going to do our best to improve it. So the general gameplay loop when you're playing this, as you can see, is basically get a nice group of enemies, maybe weaken them if you feel like it, and then use the Blood Mist. And then with all of those explosions popping, you're going to kill everything. As everything dies, more corpses spawn, which means you're going to pop more, and the cooldown is essentially null. You can permanently be immune in some of the bigger areas, especially during, say, stronghold farming, my god, or event farming especially. There are going to be bodies everywhere as many enemies densely spawn. Doing some of the most dangerous content is going to be a breeze because you're completely immune to damage. And yet, despite that, you're doing some of the biggest burst and DPS in the game available right now, which is just ludicrous. It just makes no sense. What I have done with the build, though, is put in one ability that's sort of a burst of damage, spending our resource that we're not spending in any other way. And occasionally I'll buff up my allies and make sure I have the max amount of them. In my opinion, there's probably 2 main ways you can go with this build. So let's take a look at the build, and we'll talk about exactly what I mean. From the top then, we start with our basic skill. What I'm going for on this is Decompose. This is what's allowing me to sort of click and hold on an enemy and sort of channel a sort of suck on them, and it hurts them and deals damage. What's really important about this is as I channel this for 2.5 seconds, it can spawn a corpse, which is obviously really important to this build. We want to spawn as many of those as possible. We can modify that with Enhanced Decompose for an extra 10 essence when we do that, but I'm just nagging Acolyte's Decompose to deal 10% increased damage to enemies who are currently being decomposed, as well as my minions dealing more damage. Next is your core skill. Now, for every other class, this is probably the most important thing that you pick because it's your core skill. It's your core primary source of damage. With this build and this class, nope, you don't want any of these. What you actually want on this tier is Hewed Flesh, and this is vitally important because it means every tick of damage you deal has a 12% chance at 3 out of 3 to create a corpse at the target's location. But the thing is, against bosses, as you can see, the odds are doubled. So this is still an incredible single target build for its DPS potential. With those points spent, we completely ignore this whole tree, which is just wild to me, and we go down to the next one with Corpse and Macabre, where we get our most important skills. So firstly, we have have Blood Mist. This is what we're doing to deal all damage. Of course, this is what you're going to want. And we're leveling it as much as possible to provide more healing and lower the cooldown as much as possible. Of course, we're going to enhance that. If we ever get anything that overpowers an enemy, we're going to reduce the Blood Mist cooldown. But more importantly, Ghastly Blood Mist is what we really need, because it leaves a corpse every 1 second while we're in it. So you're generating your own corpses to pop, even if there are no enemies around, which is just ridiculous. Then Corpse Explosion. Now, you're not really using this too much. It's just that the legendary literally uses this ability. So if I pull that up again just to show you, it says triggers Corpse Explosion on surrounding enemies. So in my testing with this, I found that by modifying that ability, Corpse Explosion, I'm changing the power of the Blood Mist Corpse Explosions. So by leveling it, I'm making them deal more damage. That is obviously a great thing. But then even when you enhance it, it also enhances the Blood Mist version. So it will increase the size of them. And for example, when I took this Blighted Corpse Explosion, it leaves the AoE on the ground, dealing damage over time. This is pretty cool because it's quite good for single target, building up a lot of this damage on area. But the reality is, this is a negative for most of the gameplay. You want to be popping the corpses instantly and killing everything immediately so that there's more corpses, so that you're popping more and so on. By making it a sort of damage over time version, you're having a lot less corpses immediately, and then you're not resetting your cooldown fast enough. So this is good for single target in certain situations, but overall I just think it's not worth it. Alternatively, you could consider Plague Corpse Explosion, 10% increased damage to enemies that are slowed or stunned or vulnerable, but as I'm not really working in any kind of CC in this build, I'm not really seeing that consistently. This would be good in group content though if I was playing with someone who was doing that. Finally, for this tree, we have Grim Harvest, just getting a bit of essence as we generate corpses, which is nice but not that important. Really what we care about is Fueled by Death. 12% increased damage for 4 seconds after consuming a corpse. That's so funny. Basically, you're permanently 12% increased damage. The synergy in this build is incredible, obviously, but now we reach the next tier where we completely ignore everything. We go down to the second to final tier, where I'm going to pick up one ability here, Bone Spirit. So this is a big consideration right now because you can't really upgrade this at this current version of the build. Basically what this does is consume all of my remaining essence, my primary resource. Normally this would be a bad thing because I'm probably using that for a core skill, but not in this build. The damage is even increased the more essence you spend in one cast. So if you're using a full essence use of this, it's going to do a staggering amount of burst damage in one single cast. And again, since I'm not using essence at all in this build, this is perfect. It gives me this really awesome single target, or even AoE if they're near to the target, big pop burst. That works really well in boss fights, finishing off, say, an enemy that's channeling something to make the boss immune, and providing me with basically a I kill you button if there's ever, say, a moment where I haven't reset my Blood Mist correctly. It does happen, so having this utility and that option is really nice. But I'll explain what I would go for instead of this in a sec. Finally, the ultimates. Now, I can understand why people might not take these. They're not great with this build generally. There's two options in my opinion. There's Bone Storm and then there's Army of Dead. Why we like Bone Storm is because basically we put it on, you and your golem start AoEing everything around you for a long while. You take less damage while you've got it on, and if you get Supreme Bone Storm, you have 20% increased crit, just making you deal way more damage while this is on, so you just pop it constantly every minute. It is a very nice passive thing that works in the build, but you could consider it overkill, so maybe you should consider instead Army of the Dead, which spawns a bunch of the army and just attacks random things and exploding, creating corpses. And further, if you get Prime Army of the Dead, when they die, they have a 15% chance to leave behind a corpse themselves. So through this build, we have many ways that we're enhancing corpse explosions and creating more of them. The thing is, I said you could consider something other than Bone Spirit. Since we're not upgrading it all, we don't have the points to do that, so it's not as efficient or as powerful as it could be. What would we do instead? Well, you're going to need to go to the Book of Dead to see that at level 25, you need to unlock golems, and that requires you to go do this mission, Necromancer Call of the Underworld, and that's what actually unlocks the golems. I'm in the process of doing that right now. It's not going to take me long, and I'm going to test that a little bit, but as soon as I unlock that, it's going to give me the golem ability, and the golem ability requires an ability slot, so that could go where Bone Spirit is right now. It would give me a lot less personal control over when I need to burst things down, but it would enhance the build for general gameplay a bit more consistently, and then all I would really need to think about is Blood Mist, and then using Decompose on a target whenever necessary, while, yeah, I guess maintaining my allies just because they do nice damage and buffing them up every now and then. This feels like a very brain off build is how I can describe it. It's just so ludicrously strong in both AoE and single target. You are completely immune to damage, so you don't really have to think about anything. Now you might be wondering, what about gear and other things like that? Well, there's actually another legendary or aspect effect that, yeah, enhances Blood Mist again, and I'm shocked to say that I've got it. On the weapon, you can also get Blood Mist, leaving a trail that lasts 4 seconds and deals shadow damage per second to enemies who stand in that trail. Also, you know that 20% slow that hits you when you're actually in the mist? That gets removed too. So as you can see, as I press it, I'm leaving this trail of exploding shadow, and I'm also creating more explosions and corpses on those. So between that Blood Mist enhancement and this Blood Mist corpse explosion trigger, you pretty much just want those, and you're going to be one of the strongest things in the entire game. Now, of course, there are other things you could consider with gear, and generally, as always, you're going to want things to help you with your current abilities and setup. This one, for example, means my summon minions have a 12% attack speed bonus for 3 seconds, and that generates up to 36%, so they just deal more damage generally because I have this. Maybe I could find something that enhances decompose, that would be nice, or you could just get things that are generally going to be nice, like this one that gives me a barrier when facing elites. Anything that enhances your gameplay slightly, making you deal more damage, or making things a bit more versatile, a bit more utility, that's what I would suggest. But ultimately, as long as you've got this, you're broken. And if you've got the other enhancement to Blood Mist, things are even smoother, but it's honestly not even necessary. But there you have it, the Blood Mist build for Necromancer in the beta or open beta of Diablo 4. This is unbelievably stupid, and I genuinely don't think it will last. I imagine any Necromancer who gets this is going to be using it, and I imagine a lot of people are going to be talking about this build in the coming days as people discover it. I was extremely lucky to get it at like level 12 in this playthrough, and since then it's all I've been doing for a good reason. So if you get the chance to try it, I recommend it. But to be honest with you, Necromancer's feeling incredible when it's functional and normal, not broken in this way, just really good. All of its abilities and its playstyles, they all feel really strong. We'll see how things change in the full release, because there's got to be some adjustment going on. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.